what was the most recent biblical doctrine that motivated you to serve God with more devotion? I'll say that one more time in case you didn't get it.
I got to big up adoption for me.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Adoption for me is, something I dug into, of course, time and time again. But every time I do, and I think the depth of God's love and His grace, me being lost, loving my sin, being in my, the fact that He didn't have to do anything for me, and how He adopted me before even I was in my mother's womb.
Mm-hmm.
In God's eternal mind, He chose me, He elected me, and He saved me.
Foreknew you.
Listen, man. That for me. I think that's just going to be almost like a permanent devotion for the believer.
Yeah.
Even in heaven, when you think of adoption, there, it's going to rock you there.
Yeah.
For me, that one for me definitely motivates me to serve God even more.
Yeah.
And to love Him more, and so. Yeah, we only love because He first loved us.
That's right.
And so for me, that's the big one. I'll say adoption.
I think recently, I would have to say the immutability of God. His unchanging ways. I mean, He remains the same. And I think that ties in with the adoption aspect because He chose me, knowing how wretched I would be, knowing how sinful I would be, even after knowing Him. How much I would still struggle with sin, which kind of speaks to the power of sin, how powerful sin is, sinful desires even are within ourselves, which in turn speaks of the power of the cross, how powerful the life of Christ is and was at the cross, and so for Him to not change and to continue to be the same, though I am so shifty and constantly changing, and yet He remains. That to me is like, if there was ever a characteristic about a spouse that you would want, it would be that they would not change. Like if they were right and perfect and good and loved you like no one else, you would never want that to go away.
Right.
And with marriage, you see a picture, of your relationship with the Lord, us being His bride. And He is unchanging, and He's perfect. So the fact that He don't change is banging.
Yeah,
like,
right.
Yeah,
His steadfast love endures forever, man.
Yes, endures forever.
Always.
And forever.
Always.
Yeah. And He casts our sins and iniquities from east to west.
It's crazy.
He casts them that far away. So, yeah.
It's good.
Yeah, that's good. I would say with me, and I couldn't find a name for this, so maybe y'all know it, maybe not, but y'all know what I'm talking about. I would say the doctrine of obedience. And by that, let me explain what I mean, because I don't even think that's a real title right there. The doctrine of obedience. What I mean by that is, if you love me, then you will obey me. And just reading those words right there, when Christ says something just simple as that, if you love me, then you will obey me, it just brings into my mind at that moment so many different things. Even thinking about the fact that you can't obey Him without having His grace to be able to obey Him. These are things that God gives us in order to worship and serve Him and to serve others.
You sound like a Calvinist.
yeah, you know what I mean? And there's just so many things that come to mind whenever I read the words of Christ when He says, if you love me, you'll obey me. I think about relationship. If I'm walking with Him, I'm going to catch some of His light. His glory is going to rub off on me, like Moses when he was with God on the mountain for 40 days. And when anytime that he would go to see God afterwards, he would have to wear a veil because the glory of the Lord would rub off on him. And it's the same way. If you love me, you'll obey me. This is Jesus saying this. So of course, if we love Jesus, we'll walk with Him, we'll follow Him. And guess what? That obedience will be given to us, that grace to obey Him. So when I'm thinking about that, I'm thinking, man, just look at how God can transform your life by you just showing more and more affection to him and loving him and just seeking him. Really seeking God will draw you to obey him even more.
Right.
When you realize all that he's done for you, you'll never get to the point where you're like, all right, I'm good.
Right.
It's constant transformation. It's constant renewal of the mind. And God, it's something about our hearts that just, it's almost like they melt away when we get in the presence of God. And then when they melt, he just reshapes them and reforms them every time.
He gives us a new heart.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, that's what David prayed for in Psalm 51. Give me a new heart, Lord.
Yeah.
And it's important to note too that that's descriptive of someone who follows Christ. That it's not prescriptive.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think in John 8, when he says, if you remain, you are truly my disciples. He's saying, this is what a disciple looks like. Not necessarily this is what you have to do, because he did the work. So if he does a genuine work, which he does in a believer, when he does the work that he does, the believer will be a disciple. He will love him, you know? And so it's descriptive of us.
And he who remains in my word, the truth will set him free.
Right. And so that follows, and I think that's so dope, because it always points back to what he did first.
That's right.
We can't love him without him.
Yeah.
We can't obey him without him, you know. So.
The author and finisher of our faith, those who endure to the end. And speaking about those who endure to the end, thank y'all for being with us this whole episode.
Right.
Y'all been strong in that comment section.